We are on the verge of a fall Toronto real estate market that is going to be the busiest market we've seen since the year 2021. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Last Honest Realtor podcast. I'm your host, David Fleming. Thank you so much for joining me here today, as it has certainly been a while. It has been, I believe, 6 or 8 weeks since our last podcast. And yes, I took a little bit of time off. To be perfectly honest, I thought maybe, just maybe, the Last Honest Realtor was getting a bit stale. 2025. It's been a pretty boring year in real estate. And by boring, I mean balanced. I mean flat. I mean good for buyers, good for sellers. But hey, that doesn't sell. Remember when the market was ripping? Toronto Life was writing articles about bidding wars and people sleeping in the streets to be first in line in a new sexy pre-construction offering. Toronto in 2025 has been a very balanced market. And I did think, yeah, you know what? Let's take some time. Let's take the summer. And of course, I spent the summer taking time away from the podcast to do this new thing. It's a fad. It's called, what is it called? Oh yeah, being a father. Yeah, I tried that for a little bit. The kids enjoy that. No, they're not newborns. They're 8 and 5. Just took a little bit more time with them. In all seriousness, no, I did have a bunch of people that reached out and said, where's the podcast? That felt very nice because I don't know what the metric is for the success of a real estate agent's podcast. I think 1,500 views could be great. But if some teenager in Valdosta, Georgia can eat a Tide Pod and convulse on the floor in a video and get 9 million views, well, I guess we're grading on a curve of success, aren't we? So I did enjoy the podcast over the last year and a half, but we took the break. I also thought a lot of podcasters have seasons. I was told that. You don't do 52 weeks a year. It kind of reminds me of when we were younger and like a season of Beverly Hills 90210 from September to May was like 28 episodes. And well, now on Netflix, it's like 6 episodes, and then you wait 2 years for the second season of 1923, which is definitely worth it. So we're back. We're going to be doing this every 2 weeks starting today. This is in advance of Labor Day, in advance of the start of the fall market, and I wanted to get out ahead of what I honestly do think is going to be a very busy fall. Now, far be it for me to say that because I'm a real estate agent, and most of the time when I do these podcasts, I have a lot of people in the YouTube comments that are angry. Welcome to Toronto, welcome to Canada, really, and talking about how my view is biased. So today I'm going to provide you with a lot of data, or if you'd like, data. I think that if you're a nerd like me, you will enjoy the following. Lots of numbers, and I have this saying, you can make numbers say anything you want, but I really do believe today I'm going to show you why I think this is going to be a busy fall market. Now, I will also say on a personal level, and this is part of the reason why we took some time away from the podcast, we spent all of June, July, and August prepping listings for September. So part of the reason I think we're going to have an insanely busy fall is just because when I look at myself and my own team, we've got 12 listings coming to market in September. 11 of them are freehold. That's a very, very busy September. And that's just now 2 weeks before Labor Day as we film this. So if that is indicative of the entire market, and yes, of course, every agent and every team and every brokerage is different, but I'm feeling it. I'm feeling a vibe out there. And even over the last couple of weeks, agents are starting to talk and saying, hey, do you feel things picking up a little bit? I certainly do. So I hope you had a fantastic summer. You were probably watching or listening to this a week before Labor Day. So, hey, there's still a little bit of time to soak it in. But as I mentioned, we're going to be doing the podcast every 2 weeks. So hopefully you'll be listening to this as well, some of you at least, in the first week of September. So on Toronto Realty blog over the last few years, I have done a January feature and a September feature, which is essentially the start of the spring market and the start of the fall market, where I refer to it as the burning questions or the discussion points. What are the most important things that we're going to be talking about or be witnessing or be immersing ourselves in as we move forward? That is what I want to do today. So call these burning questions or just call them discussion points, but there's 5 things. And as mentioned, it's going to be extremely data heavy. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, it's exceptionally boring. Can we put a marker? Can you skip ahead? Can you put a marker for like something cool? 28 minutes and 9 seconds. It's interest rates. Now, if you're like me, you're tired of the incessant conversations in this country about interest rates. But good news, folks, interest rates brings about a conversation about inflation and unemployment as well. So the next interest rate announcement is on September 17th. Now, a brief refresher here for those that have been living in a cave on Mars with their hands on their eyes and their ears covered. That's a line from The Simpsons, which I haven't watched in 20 years. A brief refresher. There was this thing called the pandemic. You might remember it. And we saw the Bank of Canada slash interest rates down to 0.25%. Now, in March of 2022, which ironically was just about the peak of the market, our government, and all governments are reactive, not proactive. Well, not all of them. Ours probably tops the list in all areas. They decided to start an aggressive campaign of increasing interest rates. We saw 10 straight interest rate increases from March of 2022 to July of 2023, where we went from 0.25% all the way to 5%. A lot of you already know this. And then 11 months later, it's 12 months in a year, David, we saw the Bank of Canada start decreasing rates. So we saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rate cuts. These rate cuts stopped in March. 7 straight cuts from June of 2024 through March of 2025. And in June, if you're like me, you expected another cut, and we did not see one. July 30th, we expected another cut. We did not see one. So the next magic date is September 17th. Are we going to see a rate cut? Now, after that, there are 2 more announcements. One is October 29th, 2 days before Halloween. My front yard will be covered in inflatable blow-ups because my son is obsessed with them. And then the last announcement by the Bank of Canada is December 11th, which was my first girlfriend's birthday. I just remembered that. I actually remember her Hotmail password from 24 years ago. No, David, we were talking about interest rates. 3 announcements, September 17th, October 29th, and December 11th. Are we going to see cuts? And that's what everybody wants to know. I will also say this. As much as these are important for affordability, they're not the be-all and end-all. And I think so many folks out there, whether you're involved in the real estate market or not, are feeling that if we don't get cuts, it's bad or it's doomed for the real estate market. And if we do get cuts, it's going to light a fire under it. But evidence shows us that that didn't happen last year. We saw the first rate cut in June of 2024. Now, I, through my podcast, through Toronto Realty blog, started to say that people are smart and they will get out ahead of the rate cuts. And we're going to see a really busy fall market in 2024. And I was so wrong. I gave people too much credit. I thought that people would buy ahead of rate cuts because that's what smart money does. But as the saying goes, 10% of money is smart money. So 10% of people bought ahead of the rate cuts. And you know what? You might have seen a further price dip. If you're buying a 20-year house, it probably doesn't matter if the price is lower 9 months after you bought and then starts to go up again. But I do think this time around, with the Bank of Canada rate setting at 2.75%, which is down from 5%, we are going to see at least 1, potentially 2 rate cuts. September 17th, October 29th, and December 11th, the 3 dates the Bank of Canada is making the announcements. Will that result in folks getting out ahead of the market? It didn't happen before. I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. It will make a difference in terms of affordability, absolutely. And for those of you, I did a podcast last year and I did a couple of blogs about the fact that I bought 2 condos in 2024. Bought ahead of what I thought was the bottom of the market. Prices have dipped a little bit. I might actually go look for another one. Prices are wild out there in the condo market. A lot of people are going to start typing the YouTube comment section, $400,000 for a condo. It should be $100,000. I don't know what to say to you. I think the market has bottomed, and we will talk about the condo market in a little bit. Now, the chatter about the cuts depends a lot on unemployment and inflation. Now, at the day we decided to film this, interesting timing, because yesterday we started to read about the announcement coming today as we film, which was literally a half hour ago, about inflation. So this was in yesterday's newspaper. In the Globe and Mail, Canada's Consumer Price Index report for July is due on Tuesday, that's today. Economists expect the annual rate of increase in consumer prices to ease to 1.8% from 1.9% in June. Well, guess what? We have the number, and it's 1.7%. So what does that mean? I think it means a rate cut's coming on September 17th. You heard it here first. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you heard it here somewhere else. Maybe you heard it somewhere else first because we're doing this a week in advance. But I find it ironic that all of the conversation yesterday, being Monday, the 18th, I believe, was about this estimate. We were at 1.9% inflation in June. And you could talk, you don't want to because it's incredibly boring, but you could talk about all the different types of inflation, the different measures, and the conversation in the last few months has been about how, well, the underlying numbers are even worse, and they talk about core inflation and all these wonderful things. But let's just say that if you're looking at the very most basic number, and I told you I was going to bore you with numbers today, we're at 1.7%, down from 1.9 and even lower than what the economists expected at 1.8%. I believe that we are going to see a rate cut on September 17th. So then you look at the unemployment data, and I'm going to pull this up here. So we went through the rates, and I'll get to banks' projections in a moment. But when you look at the unemployment data, we topped out at 7% in May. We're down to 6.9% for July. But if you were to trace this back to January of 2023, we're at 5.1% unemployment. Unemployment has significantly increased. But at the same time, inflation, if you want to look at January of 2023 as the number, inflation was at 5.9%. Now, we hit a peak of, I believe it was 8.7% earlier that year in mid-2022. But to see unemployment go from 5.1% up to 7%, inflation to go from 5.9% down to, as it was last month, 1.7%, I think the Bank of Canada is going to have a really, really difficult time deciding what to do. Because if you're just basing your decision for interest rates on the inflation data, well, that's fantastic. Inflation's down to 1.7%. Let's start cutting. But with unemployment still pushing 7%, and with that number being significantly less in the United States, I am optimistic for that rate cut. But let's see what the experts are saying. So I'm going to pull the data from, this is the last data I have, June 23rd, 2025. They said that there was a 40% chance of a rate cut on July 30th and a 60% chance of no cut. We did not see a cut. For September 17th, and again, considering that this is a June 23rd poll, a 72% chance of a cut on September 17th and a 28% chance of a cut of no cut. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull any projections today because we just got those numbers, but I think it's fair to say that we are more than likely going to see that rate cut. Now, as far as banks' projections for the end of the year, we are still seeing some of the banks projecting a rate of 2%, which would mean another 75 basis points cut. So if you look at the big five banks plus NBC, because we have that here, so we have Scotia, TD, CIBC, RBC, and BMO, you have 3 of the 6 are projecting a Bank of Canada rate at 2% by the end of the year. So enough about interest rates, unemployment, and inflation. Let's get on to something a little bit more fun, but unfortunately, or fortunately, it's more about data. Folks, it is sales volume. Now, what in the world is happening with sales? I've been talking about sales all year. And again, I'm a huge stats nerd, so I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. Just if you're a visual thinker, picture this. Toronto sales in the year 2021, 122,000. Last year, there were 68,000 sales, a little more than half. Just think about where sales have gone. Now, of course, we were at a peak. You want to look at 2020, of course, we had the pandemic, 95,000 sales. You want to go to, say, 2019, where's 2019? 88,000 sales. So relatively speaking, yeah, 68,000 is not terrible. But on my list right here of sales since 2002, that's when I started tracking the data because there was redistricting. And to be perfectly honest, I think the city was half the size. But if you look at the bottom 2 years on this list, it's 2023 and it's 2024. So we went down to 66,315 sales in 2023. And last year we moderately increased to 67,984. So coming off of a peak, now price peak, as we know, was February of 2022. Sales peak was 2021 with 122,000. Now the year 2022, ironically, only saw 75,000 sales. And that's because we saw our peak Jan, Feb, March, and then the government stepped in, started raising interest rates, started talking about cooling the market. There's nothing that cools the market more than a government that talks about wanting to cool the market. It's one thing to raise rates and make it less affordable. It's another thing to stand up and signal, hey, we're going to tank the real estate market. And we saw this happen in 2017, of course, as well. So 75,000 sales in 2022, 66,000 in 2023, 67,000 in 2024. Where are we in 2025? January saw the 4th lowest sales in any month of January. February saw the fewest sales in any month of February. March saw the fewest sales in any month of March. April saw the fewest sales in any month of April. May saw the fewest sales in any month of May. June saw the 2nd fewest. And then, believe it or not, in July, we saw the 6th fewest, only the 6th fewest. Now, the media kept talking about this increase. And while being afraid of the regulatory bodies and organized real estate, I'm going to say this. A lot was made of the press release that the Toronto Real Estate Board put out. This is what it said. The Greater Toronto Area experienced the best home sales result for the month of July since 2021. Sales were also up relative to listings, suggesting a modest tightening in the market compared to last year. Not in any way untrue. But what happened was the media latched onto this statistic, up 10.9%. Okay. So sales are at an all-time low in 2024, and we're putting off fireworks because sales are up 10.9%. Now, as I wrote in Toronto Realty blog, and I quoted this, a colleague of mine texted me, the Greater Toronto Area experienced the best home sales for the month of July since 2021. He's quoting the press release. And then he said, question, why am I paying hundreds of dollars per year for a marketing board that delivers soundbite-sized misinformation at a level that is borderline negligent, sandbagging me in front of my clients instead of delivering real, valuable insight, full statistics based in reality? I mean, that's one person's take and it's not mine, so please don't hold it against me. But I think the point is that you can make numbers say anything you want. And obviously the Toronto Real Estate Board's marketing department, they're probably really good at marketing, maybe not as good as analyzing the data. You could have done this two different ways. You could have said sales were terrible. They were the sixth lowest in any month of July ever in a year where sales are going to bottom out all time. Or you could have said, hey, sales are up 10.9% year over year. So take that for what it is. The question I asked on Toronto Realty blog after I, for a change, was very cynical with respect to both the TREB press release and what my colleague messaged me was, is this a sign of things to come? Now, a 10.9% increase, and you're still seeing the sixth lowest sales in any month of July. Listen, I don't think that's anything to light fireworks about, but it does kind of change the trend. As I said, February, March, April, and May, we saw the lowest sales in those respective months ever. June was the second lowest, and July was the sixth lowest. Let's just wait and see what happens with the month of August and maybe into September. To me, I might argue that this is potentially the start of a trend. Now, here's a fun one for you. If we were to look, and I did this on Toronto Realty blog, to try to estimate how many sales there will be by the end of 2025, we mentioned relative to 2023 and 2024, which had the lowest sales volume in any year since 2002, sales through July are way below 2023 and 2024. So again, if you look at 2023, we had 66,000 and change sales. 2024, 68,000. If you use the June data and extrapolate it, we are on pace for 57,347 sales, which would obliterate the all-time low record. If you extrapolate through July, where we saw this magical uptick that the media and TREB was talking about, 59,852 sales. So again, I would ask the question, is July the start of a trend? And believe it or not, I saw a very little sign of strength in the condo market. And I will talk about the condo market in a moment. So I came into this podcast saying that I think it's going to be a very busy fall. Busy relative to the last three falls, which were incredibly slow. Busy relative to a 2025, which I describe as boring because it's unsexy, because it's flat, because it's balanced. I think that we are still on pace for, and we will still achieve, the lowest sales in any year since 2002, when I started tracking the data. But I do think that you will see an uptick in sales September, October, and November. So when we talk about sales, we should probably talk about inventory as well. And again, being the numbers nerd that I am, this is so fascinating. And whatever hobby you're into, I could probably make fun of it. I am so into this data set. Listen to this. 20,000 active listings in a month. That's my metric. It happened 0 times in 2020. It happened 0 times in 2021. It happened 0 times in 2022. It happened 0 times in 2023. It happened 7 times in 2024. May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 7 months in a row in the year 2024, we saw 20,000 active listings. That's crazy. You don't have to be a statistician to tell me that after seeing 0 months in 2020 through 2023, okay, so that's 48 months, where you saw over 20,000 active listings, it happened 7 times in 2024. Now, here's the fun part, because if that stats didn't, blow your mind or skirt or whatever, can you say that? Well, I did. Here's what happened in 2025. The record for active listings in any one month was 27,373 in September of 2008. And ironically, the top 6 spots on the list of active listings in any month were all 2008. That was a very tough year as far as worldwide financial crisis goes. In April of 2025, we set a new record with 27,386 active listings. But that record was obliterated the next month in May with over 30,964 active listings. I just told you that there were 0 months for 4 years with 20,000 active listings. And now I'm telling you, there's almost 31,000 in June of 2025. Well, guess what? That was May of 2025. Guess what? June, there was even more, 31,603. So if you're playing along at home, that's May, June, and July with over 30,000 active listings in Toronto, not to mention 27,386 in April. So far this year, folks, we have seen March, April, May, and June with over 20,000. And we've seen 3 months with over 30,000. So again, maybe you're bored by the data, or maybe you're like me and you see just how absurd this is. And I might say, if I wanted to really pump the tires of Toronto real estate, shouldn't prices be absolutely cratering? Shouldn't prices be dropping in half? No, it speaks to the resiliency of the Toronto real estate market, which I've always maintained. Yeah, you're at an all-time 20-year high in the spring of 2022, and then prices drop 15%. Womp womp. You literally saw a 400% increase, and then prices dropped 15%, and people were like, sound the alarm, the market's crashing. Now I'm really pumping the tires. But as far as inventory goes, I just absolutely cannot believe these levels. We've never seen this before. Now, I mentioned the 20,000 number, which to me is the number of what is a lot. May of 2019, that was the last time we saw 20,000. We went May of 2019 through May of 2024. We went 5 years without seeing a month, or I guess it would be 59 months, 5 years minus a month, without seeing a month with over 20,000 active listings. And then last year we saw it happen 7 times, and this year we're over 30,000. So keep that in mind as we move forward, because the absorption in the market, and absorption rate's another stat that's very near and dear to me, it's the ratio of sales to new listings. And of course it gets skewed when listings happen, a property is terminated and then it comes back out, and then it's terminated, it comes back out. Of course, the listing data is skewed with all of the relistings. But anything less than 50% signals a buyer's market, and anything more than 50% signals a seller's market. And at one point, we were regularly seeing in 2021, 2022, absorption rates in the 70 to 80% range. We're way below 50%. And I don't want to get into absorption right now because we're going to talk about it in the condo market. But I do think that as the active listings continue to ramp up, that's something to consider. So one last thing on inventory. There's another metric that I like. It is subtracting new listings from active listings. Now, the difference is a new listing is new. It comes out. How many properties were listed in a month? Active listings is at the end of the month, how many are left over? The reason that's important is because it speaks to the absorption. So how do you have a negative ratio? Let's just look at, let's say, March of 2021. There were 10,603 active listings, which means that's how many properties were on the market for sale at the end of the month. But in that month, there were 22,709 listings. So you have a deficit of over 12,000 listings. What it means is that properties are almost selling faster than they can be listed. And of course, the leftover inventory, or what some people call the month of inventory, is being absorbed. So if you have a sale in the month of August 2025, that listing might have come out in June. Point being, if you get into a red hot market, where let's just make simple numbers, 10 properties are listed, but you see 13 sales, that's because some of the leftover inventory from previous months that didn't sell is now starting to move. So I think that was my third point, active listings and the inventory level. I chose active listings as opposed to new listings because, my God, the numbers are just absolutely staggering. But when you look at sales, which we did, our second point here, you have to consider listings as well. And that is something to look out for as we move into and through the fall market. Now, the next topic of discussion is quite simply the condo market. Condo market bad. Condo market not good. Can we just leave it at that? No, I should probably flush it out a little bit. How's this for a bullet point? This is the worst condo market I've seen in my entire career. I mean, it's true. Now, we have to distinguish between pre-construction and resale, because when you are seeing headlines, and this is what I love, sarcasm, the media for, is that you continue to see headlines about the condo market that say things like, worst year for sales in 30 years. Yes, in pre-construction. And I have spent 17 years, 18 years on Toronto Realty blog writing about pre-construction, which I do not sell. I have a great blog post. It's actually an article we're taking from our Insights magazine that we mail out to our clients in September. I call it the final nail in the coffin. No, the house of cards. I called it the house of cards that was always going to fall. And I might actually post that on Toronto Realty blog. It's basically a summary of my thoughts and expressions on the pre-construction industry since I started in this business in 2004, since I started writing about it in 07 and 08. But the point is, no, I've never supported the pre-construction industry. I've never thought that the pricing makes sense. There's a million and one reasons, and I've done podcasts and blogs on this. Finally, people stopped buying. And we saw, Urbanation is a great resource for this. We saw all-time low, well, 30-year low, but again, 30 years ago, the city was half the size, low sales data in 2024 and into 2025. That's not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about pre-construction. I don't want to talk about pre-construction. It's gambling. That's what it was. It's gambling. It's people paying $1,700 a square foot for something that's worth $1,200 because they think it's going up. None of it makes any sense. And one day I'll write a book on this 15 years from now, okay? But right now we're going to talk about the resale condo market. Why that's important to distinguish that is because people that are owning condos right now and trying to buy houses can't, because they can't sell their condos. Why the pre-construction market really doesn't matter right now is because, let's be honest, over the last 10 years, users weren't buying pre-construction condos. They were investors. They were, as people like to say, foreign investors. They were people looking to lock up money in an illiquid asset and investment. They are not the same folks as those that are in the resale market right now. Those folks are trying to sell in order to buy to move up. Those folks are trying to sell to what? Move to the States for a job. They can't sell. They put on the market for rent. Now you have more units up for the rental market. The rental market is affected. There's so many things that come out of this condo market. It's not just about condos. A soft condo market, soft resale condo market, is going to affect the rental market. And that's going to affect investors. It's going to affect the resale freehold market because, as I've mentioned 4 times now, how many folks right now are in a condo that they can't sell and they need to sell it in order to buy the house? So yes, it is the worst condo market I've seen in 21 years. I'm being honest about that. I'm telling my clients that. In fact, one of the folks that emailed me and said, he wants to sell his condo in the fall, said, where's the Last Honest Realtor podcast? And a lot of folks ask about that. It was very nice. But I said to this individual, this is the worst condo market I've seen in 21 years. I'm opening with that. I'm being honest about it. I can't not say that. But here's something. I listed a condo down at Wellington and Blue Jays Way a few weeks ago. We listed this for $429, and it sat on the market for 2 weeks. Then we got an offer. How much was the offer? $379. It's a terrible offer. It's 50 grand below list. And I'm not going to say that I don't like negotiating. I don't like doing my job. I really don't like the futile attempts when someone's on the other end of the phone and they start with, what you need to realize is, I'm like, dude, my client's not selling this for $379. We didn't sign it back. What we did do was notify all other agents that we had an offer. And you have to do that legally. And guess what? 2 other people made offers. And both of those people offered over $440,000. I told you it was listed for $429. We had 2 offers over $440. Thank you to the guy that lowballed us at $379. I have not had 3 offers on a condo listing since 2023. Like I said, small signs of strength in the market. Now that is exactly 1 listing. I have had 3 listings this year for condos that were taken off the market. One of them, my clients owned it in a building that allows Airbnb. They said, David, we've reduced the price 4 times. We can't sell this. We're not giving it away. We're going to keep it, Airbnb it, and we'll talk to you in a couple of years. One of them, my client who had been renting it out and who desperately wanted to sell, said, I can't give this away. I'm going to put a tenant in there. I'll talk to you in a couple of years. And one of them was an individual that was just looking for a change of pace, wanted to sell, wanted to move out of the area, was looking for something new and different, said, why am I selling into the worst condo market? I'm going to take it off the market. Guys, not to talk about my stats or toot my own horn here, but like, I don't remember the last time I had a listing that didn't sell. And every agent is different. The business models, I talked to some of the big listing agents and, their sell rates and whatever. I'm not, a numbers guy. I'm an agent that works on listings, that works with the client, that takes them from A to B. It's very rare to have listings that just don't sell. I had three of them between March and June. That's really, really rare. But then in August, I got 3 offers on a condo listing. I'm not looking for signs that the market's turning around. These reasons are coming to me. And 3 offers on a $429,000 condo that sold for $445,000, that to me is a sign of strength in the market. Now, I continue to talk about trends within this data set that I'm looking at. And I tell you, you can make numbers say anything you want, but you tell me if this is a trend. Absorption rate, we mentioned this. It is the ratio between sales and new listings. Any absorption rate of less than 50% signals a buyer's market. In the condo market, we started in the 416. We'll do 416. In the condo market, we started January at 25.1%. That is a pittance. 30.9% in February, 26.1% in March, 25% in April, 24.2% in May. So that's a trend, 26, 25, 24. June up to 27.7, and guess what? July up to 31%. You tell me, is that a trend? That's the highest absorption rate in the condo market in any month so far in 2025. And it's in the summer when historically the absorption rate is lower. Now, I mentioned earlier about absorption rates that are in the 70% range. Let's look at 2021. 90% in Feb, 77 in March, 64 in April, 56 in May, 57 in June, 59 in July. So what you see there is the trend is that it goes down. 2022, from Feb to July, 69, 63, 46, 37, 37, 39. My point is, and I warned you about the data and the numbers. My point is that usually you see the absorption rate lower as you move into summer. We just saw the absorption rate increase. So once again, tell me I'm pumping tires. My favorite saying is you can make numbers say anything you want, but I'm seeing strength in the condo market. Not strength, relative strength. I opened up to you. I told you I had 3 listings that I did not sell, and that's not something I'm used to. That was in the spring. I just told you that I had a listing that had 3 offers. Now I'm seeing the data in July where we have a yearly high in the absorption rate in the summer when usually you bottom out. Is this the start of a trend, guys? It's not rhetorical. I actually don't know. I also mentioned I bought 2 condos in 2024. There's a condo right now in the Distillery District. They're listed for $419,000. It's a piece of crap. Like, it needs new counters, new carpet. Well, not new carpet, rip out the carpet. But that same model sold for $494,000 in Jan. And it sold for $535,000 with parking last year. Would they sell for $400,000? Probably. They're at $419,000. Would they sell for $390,000? Would they sell for $380,000? Oh, I'm licking my chops. Maybe it's time. Maybe go out there and buy another condo. So I'm talking about how strong it is, and I'm using that example of how weak it is. There are some people right now that are stuck in these units that will not move. That particular unit, it's ugly. It's dirty. It's gross, right? And by that, I mean, respectfully, it's a 25-year-old unit. It hasn't been touched. How many people have lived there? How many tenants have been through there? Laminate countertops, original white appliances, chip tile, dirty, cigarette burned carpets. It needs like $12,000 in upgrades. That's the kind of stuff that's not moving. My place I mentioned at Blue Jays in Wellington, fully renovated, beautifully staged, and well priced. So, last thought about the condo market. As I mentioned at the onset, this is why it's important. You paid $600,000 for a condo, and you want to buy a house, and your condo is now worth $550,000, or it's worth $5,000, or whatever it's worth. Are you going to sell and take a loss and go buy a house? Some are, some aren't. If you are you going to be able to sell that condo? And that is why I felt in the spring, that magic price point in the freehold market, that $1.3 million entry-level home, like legitimately, I'm in Leslieville on a prime street with a beautiful Edwardian, and I'm having trouble moving it. That was based on the condo market. I remember Tara, who works on my team, she did the open house. She sent me a photo, and I've done this one before. A Bluntstone convention. That's what she said to me. I was like, what? She sends me a photo, and there's 30 pairs of shoes at the front door of this house in Leslieville, and they're all Bluntstones because, I don't know, what, all young people are hippies or they don't have, any originality. All the shoes at the front of the door, whether they're Bluntstones or not, it was a Bluntstone convention. It was just a ton of young people coming to the open house to look at this beautiful $1.4 million house in prime Leslieville, but they all owned condos. And they all talked to Tara and were like, yeah, we'd love to buy a house. It's just the condo market's so bad, we're not going to be able to sell our condo. Does that change this fall? If we see strength in the condo market, we will see all of those folks who are stuck in their condos actually be able to move into the freeholds that they want. So the last point here, guys, 30 minutes, I was told. Yeah, sure. The last point here, guys, is going to be about prices. Now, this is the $1 million question. This is what everybody wants to know. Now, I mentioned I was bullish about the spring of 2025, and then Donald Trump came in and just shocked all of our worlds. I think, and I'm not going to get into politics now, but I think it's fair to say that no matter how many times this guy threatens tariffs or talks about ruining the country or whatever, I think people are really desensitized to it. And you remember when the stock market tanked, and you remember how hard it was in Jan, Feb, March in the real estate market. I don't know. I think a lot of that blustering is kind of past us. So I was very bullish in the spring. I even told you I was bullish last fall because I thought people would get out ahead of rate cuts. But I'm going to double or triple down now. I think we're going to see prices move up in the fall. Now, here's a fun one. Unless you're tired of all the data. I love looking at market peak. And what I mean by that is the average home price in any month between January and June, which one's the highest? Now, if you look from Jan to June, and that's what we call the spring market, it's typically in May. I'm looking at 2022 to 2025, so that's a 24-year period. Twice we peaked in Feb, 4 times we peaked in April, 3 times we peaked in June, and the rest we peaked in May. But what about the fall? So if we extrapolate this, and now I'm going to go to a slightly smaller font with my glasses here, we can see that from 2002 to 2024, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times we saw a peak in October, and 1, 2, 3 times we saw a peak in November. Now, interesting, you would think that September is probably the busiest month, the best month for prices. We've never seen from the year 2002 to 2024, we've never seen a peak price achieved in the month of September. Now, as I mentioned, I believe the data set for the month of May, this was in 23 years, 15 times we saw a peak in May. When you extrapolate this out and include the entire year, it drops to 8. 8 times in 24 years, which is exactly 1/3, we see a May peak. But if you look at October, and let's combine it, with November, 9 times. So a little more than a third, let's say rough math, 38 to 40% chance based on history here that you're going to see a peak in the fall, a peak home price. So guys, the peak home price so far this year was $1,120,000 in May. I think we're going to beat that in September or October or November. I want you to mark my words or whatever that means. Put a marker here. Take a sticky note. Put it on your wall. David said, we are going to see an average home price in September or October that is higher than $1,120,000. And also part of the reason why, guys, and this is the last stat I'm going to bore you with here, is when I look at the month over month change in average home price from 2024 to 2025, we started the year in Jan. It was up 1.4%. Jan over Jan, 2024 to 2025. But Feb was down 2.2, March was down 2.5, April was down 4.2, May was down 3.8, June was down 5.2, and July was down 5. So if you're going to say to me, David, how in the world are you looking at strength in the fall market when the trend seems to be pushing towards a year-over-year 5% decline? Well, because I think that represented the bottom. For reference, our 1,120,879 peak in May was 3.8% lower than the 1,165,691 in May of 2024. I don't think it's gonna be hard at all to top 1,120,000. In fact, on my blog earlier this year, I do every year this prediction game. And I think in 2024, we had maybe 16, 17 entrants. This year we had like 35. I asked people to predict things about, there's specific questions about interest rates, inventory, prices, etc. One of the questions was, will we see an average home price in any month top $1.2 million? I don't think we're going to get there, but we are sure as hell going to top 1,120,000. To me, that's an absolute no-brainer. So keep in mind, guys, our peak was in February of 2022. That was $1,334,000. We're now sitting at a seasonally depressed, because it's the month of July, $1,050,000 and change. But we're also coming off of a 20-year bull run. Anecdote for you. It's 2004, and I'm just finishing up my real estate license. And I'm walking up on Bayview in Leaside near the TD Bank, and I see a gentleman that I used to do some work for, landscaping and such, in between, university and doing real estate license, kind of odd jobbing. And I said, hey, I'm going into real estate. He said, oh, that's amazing. I was like, yeah, I'm just finishing up my courses. I'm hoping to be selling real estate by the summer. And he said, it's too bad you're choosing now. And I said, why? He said, well, the market's about to tank. I was like, wait, what? And he goes, yeah, the market's been going up for 5-6 years. These things happen in cycles, And unfortunately, you're getting in the business at a very difficult time. The market's about to tank. Now, this is somebody that is, let's say, in his 60s, has run businesses, owns real estate, extremely well-respected, extremely successful. And I'm not knocking this person. What I'm saying is that this is an example of just how resilient and how insane the Toronto real estate market has been since then. Because his point was very valid. A lot of economists and a lot of people that watch market cycles, whether it's real estate or other markets, they'll talk about 7-year cycles. And this was in 2004, and I believe the market started to go up in 98. But from 2004 to 2022, we saw nothing but an increase. In fact, I believe the statistic was we saw a year-over-year increase in average home price every year from 98 to, I believe, 2018. I don't have that in front of me, and apologies for that. But when you extrapolate, and I did this at a buyer seminar Tara was doing, I looked at the average home price on a chart from like 98 to 2024. A young guy puts up his hand and he says, didn't the market go down in 08 when the worldwide financial crisis happened? And I said, yes, it did. And you can see that in the chart. And he squinted and he looked and he's like, what are you talking about? So then I got on my laptop, I plugged it in to the projector, and I extrapolated this, I zoomed in and said, instead of looking at 25 years, let's just look at 24 months. And you can see the market when it's on a monthly, you can see that drop. The market dropped viciously in 08. But as far as a 25-year cycle goes, that is a blip on the radar. A blip on the radar. Literally and figuratively, you couldn't even see it, which is why this guy raised his hand and he said, I don't understand. I thought the market dropped. If you look at the average home price on a monthly basis in 2008, yeah, March, April, May, June, July, worldwide financial crisis, yes, and it went down. But when you extrapolate that out over 25 years, you can't even see it. Now, you can kind of see 2017. You can definitely see 2022. But it's not unlike if you were to look at, the Dow Jones, let's say, and you were to zoom in on 2019 to 2021, you're going to see this vicious drop at COVID. But if you look at a 30-year run, yeah, you'll probably see a drop at the tech bust in 02, financial crisis in 08, COVID in 2020. But our real estate market has basically gone up for 2 decades. And having peaked in 2022 in the spring and seeing a drop off now, there are a lot of folks that bought then that are maybe saying, well, I would have preferred to not see a decline in home value. But I truly think that we have hit bottom here. It's been 3.5 years since that peak, and prices have kind of gone down and they've just remained flat. So the final thought here on price, guys, as I mentioned, I am predicting an average home price in September or October that will be higher than the peak in May. And that will make the first time since November of 2021 where we saw any year where the peak average home price happened in the fall. So folks, those are my 5 discussion points for the fall market. We're talking about the intersection of interest rates, inflation, and unemployment. Oh, God, is that ever sexy. We're talking about sales. We're talking about inventory, this time specifically active listings. We're talking about the condo market, and we're talking about prices. And all told, I can tell you two things. Number one, it's going to be a crazy busy fall. And number two, gosh darn it to heck, I quit swearing for my 5-year-old son. It is so nice to be back here in front of these bright lights with this really cool shelf behind me. Yes, we've done some sprucing up and some great production value. I've got a very coy, very shy, young person standing behind the camera right now. I'm going to have to take a course on how to interact with young people because I'm, by the time you watch this, going to have had one of those birthdays. Yeah, send me flowers. No, but seriously, it's all good, folks. I'm really happy to be back here behind a microphone. I have a lot of thoughts, as you can imagine, about the real estate market. And while I love writing on Toronto Realty blog, I've been doing it for 18 years, it's my passion. I really do like talking, speaking, and it's just a different way to connect with people. Some folks like to read, some people like to watch and listen. And if you're doing that today, thank you so much. Please remember to like, comment, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts through Spotify or Apple Music. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to drop me a comment, even if it's a very angry one. I do like reading those. Sometimes they're fun. I share them with my wife. And folks, have a happy fall market, have a safe and happy Labor Day, and we'll see you here next time on The Last Honest Realtor.